Rick wiped the sweat from his brow as he tightened the last bolt on the generator. The storm outside rattled the walls of the outpost, its acidic rain pummeling the roof in a constant, deafening rhythm. The night was alive with the crackling sound of green lightning, each flash illuminating the jagged, desolate landscape of Vidia, the barren planet he now called home. He'd been here for 3 years now, a quiet exile on the edge of known space. The war he'd fought in was far behind him, but its ghosts lingered in his dreams and in the scars across his body, old reminders of the battles that had torn apart his soul. He had traded a life of combat for this, repairing broken machines and watching the acid storms rage outside the only window he had left. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Safe, quiet, and alone. Or so he thought. The perimeter alarm shattered the silence, blaring through the outpost like a siren. Rick's heart leapt in his chest as his fingers instinctively moved to the shotgun mounted on the wall beside him. The blaring sound was followed by the sudden flash of green lightning that lit up the sky outside. He stood there for a moment, listening for any other signs, his breath catching in his throat. There was something wrong. He didn't wait to find out what. The shotgun was already in his hands as he moved swiftly toward the door. His boots clattered against the metal floor, and he felt the familiar rush of adrenaline course through his veins. As he stepped outside, the storm slapped him with its acidic sting, but he barely noticed. The noise of the rain was deafening, but his mind focused on one thing: who had triggered the alarm. The perimeter was close, just 15 meters south of the main door. His eyes scanned the downpour, searching for movement. Through the sheets of rain, he saw it. A shimmer, something or someone was there. He stepped forward, shotgun raised, the weapon cold and steady in his hands. The figure in the distance came into focus. A humanoid collapsed, half covered by the rain. The sight of it made his heart skip. No human should have been out here, not in a storm this intense. Rick approached cautiously, his boots crunching against the wet ground. The figure shifted as he drew closer, and that's when he saw her face. A woman, definitely human, but there was something about her, something wrong. Her eyes snapped open, and she reached up, grabbing his forearm with surprising strength. "Sanctuary," she rasped, her voice hoarse but urgent. "Sanctuary, by the code of the Frontier Accord." Rick froze, his pulse pounding in his ears. The Frontier Accord was an ancient treaty, one that Rick knew well, but it was also one that hadn't been invoked in centuries. No one used that clause anymore, not since the galaxy had moved past such formalities. It was a relic, a piece of the past. His jaw tightened as he looked down at the woman. She wasn't just any survivor, she was something more, something important. Rick pulled her into his arms before she could slip back into unconsciousness. Her grip slackened, and she slumped against him, the weight of her body almost too much to bear. "Damn it!" he muttered under his breath, slinging the shotgun over his shoulder and half carrying her back toward the shelter. The rain hissed loudly around them, but Rick barely noticed it. His mind was racing. He had no idea who she was, but the sheer force of her grip, her strength, told him she wasn't some random survivor of the storm. This woman was important, and her condition, torn suit, acid burns, and all, was not just an accident. Inside the medbay, Rick laid her out on the metal table. The sterile lighting hummed overhead as he worked quickly, unfastening her damaged suit and checking for any other signs of injury. The acid rain had eaten through parts of her suit, leaving burn marks on her skin that would have killed most people within minutes. He powered up the dermal regenerator and grabbed a medical blade from the nearby shelf. His hands were steady, but his mind was elsewhere. Too many questions, too many unknowns. The woman's chest rose and fell in ragged breaths, her face pale and covered in sweat. As he began cutting away the ruined suit, he caught a glimpse of something strange between her shoulder blades, something that pulsed faintly under her skin. He froze. It wasn't just the acid burns that caught his attention, it was the mark on her back. A crest, faint but unmistakable. Rick's breath caught in his throat. He knew that crest. He had seen it only once before, years ago in a briefing for special operations, the symbol of the Krillian royal family. "A damned royal," he whispered, his voice barely audible. He leaned closer to the mark on her back, his fingers hovering over it. The scanner beeped softly, confirming what he didn't want to believe. Identity: Emily, title first blood niece to the Krillian regent. Hyrex Veri, status declared deceased in transit 6 days ago. Threat assessment, Tier 1, strategic asset. Rick exhaled sharply, his mind reeling. Emily. She was supposed to be dead. She had been presumed killed in a surprise attack, a casualty of the Cryas ambush. And now here she was, at his doorstep, clinging to life in his medbay. He couldn't understand it. He couldn't trust it. Rick's eyes moved from the medical screen to her unconscious face. Her features were soft, but the storm's acidic burns marred her skin. There was something about her that made him hesitate. She wasn't just a fugitive. She was the heir to an empire. A woman hunted by her own family. A woman who needed sanctuary, and who, for reasons Rick couldn't understand, had chosen his doorstep to collapse on. The door to the medbay hummed as it sealed behind him. Rick took a deep breath, his heart still racing. He wasn't sure what had brought her here, but he knew one thing for sure. The storm was just beginning, and he had no idea what he had just let into his life. The medbay's security alarm suddenly blared. A new signal was detected outside, the unmistakable signature of a Krillian vessel approaching fast. Rick's eyes locked onto the screen. They were coming for her. Rick's heart skipped a beat as the medbay's security alarm screeched again. Louder now, a constant reminder that the danger wasn't just outside. It was already at the door. He glanced down at Emily, still unconscious on the table. Her breathing was shallow, her body twitching slightly in the aftermath of whatever had happened to her. Rick didn't know who she was or why she was here, but he knew this. If the Krillian Empire was hunting her, then she was someone important, too important to be left alive. The Krillians had no mercy when it came to their royal bloodline. His fingers hovered over the console beside the medbay's control panel. The scanner had already confirmed her identity, but now he needed to make a decision. He could hide her away, try to protect her until the Krillian forces arrived, or he could use his skills, his knowledge of the frontier, and his old military instincts to make a stand. But was it worth it? Was she worth it? The security feed flashed again, showing the unmistakable shape of a Krillian scout ship descending into the storm. Rick's jaw clenched as he moved toward the window, peering out through the rain-slicked glass. The ship was cutting through the storm with deadly precision, too close for comfort. Whoever they were, they wouldn't waste any time. Rick took a deep breath. His hands were shaking, but he forced them still. No time for doubt. "Emily," he muttered, looking back at her. "You'd better wake up soon." He turned back to the console, toggling the controls. His fingers flew over the interface, checking the status of the base's energy shields, securing the blast doors, and activating the perimeter defenses. It wouldn't hold against a full-scale assault, but it might slow them down long enough for him to figure out what to do next. Rick's mind raced. He needed more answers. Turning, he grabbed a nearby medical pad and started scanning Emily's injuries in more detail. The scanner flickered to life with a soft beep. The readings were bad. Extensive acid burns on her collarbone and thigh, blood loss, and the damage to her suit had compromised her mobility. But what really caught his attention were the strange readings on her neural patterns. There was something different about her. The way her brain waves fluctuated, the way they spiked. It was as if her body was connected to something else. Something powerful. Rick swore under his breath. He'd been a soldier once. He'd seen his fair share of strange things, alien tech, strange energy signatures, powerful artifacts. But this was beyond anything he could understand. Whatever it wasn't just a fugitive. She was carrying something dangerous within her. A royal bloodline, and maybe more than that. A sudden movement caught his eye. Emily's fingers twitched, her eyelids fluttering. Rick snapped to attention. "Hey, hey." She groaned softly, her eyes barely open, glazed with pain. "Where?" Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "SHH," Rick said, moving toward her. "You're safe for now." She looked at him, her pupils dilating as she focused. Then, with a strength that surprised him, she raised her hand to her neck, feeling around as if searching for something. "You," she gasped, her voice sharper now. "You cut the suit." Her eyes flicked to him, confusion clouding her gaze. "You were melting the acid rain level. 9, your suit." Rick sat on the edge of the medbed, placing a hand on her shoulder to keep her from sitting up. "The storm was a little too much for your suit. You would have died out there if I hadn't cut it open." She narrowed her eyes, glancing at the surrounding equipment. "You scanned me," she whispered, her voice thick with suspicion. "I did." Rick didn't flinch. "Had to make sure you weren't carrying any more surprises." Her breath caught and she tensed, the sharp pain in her chest evident as she tried to sit up. "The crest," she started, her voice cracking. Rick's pulse quickened. "What about it?" Her gaze was piercing now. "You know what it means." Rick didn't respond. He already knew. The crest, the symbol of the Krillian royal family, was a marker of power, of status. It was forbidden, a symbol that only the highest of royalty would carry, and it had been linked to some of the most dangerous and secretive politics in the galaxy. "You're not just a fugitive, are you?" Rick said slowly, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. "You're the heir to their throne." A brief flash of surprise flickered across her face, but she quickly regained her composure. "I was, and I still am. My uncle, Wyrex, he killed my mother and took the throne for himself." Her voice dropped lower. "I'm the last of my bloodline. That crest proves it." Rick stood up, his heart pounding. "Wait, you're telling me you're—" "I am Emily Sievy," she interrupted, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and pain. "I am the rightful heir to the Krillian throne." Rick stepped back, his mind reeling. The woman before him, this fugitive, was a princess. A royal. The last remaining member of a bloodline thought lost to time, and now she was here in his medbay, clinging to life. He shook his head, trying to clear the confusion. "But why? Why come here? Why me?" She closed her eyes briefly, exhaling a shaky breath. "Because you're the only one who can help me now. My uncle Wyrex has been hunting me for years. He wants me dead, and now that he knows I'm alive—" She paused, her voice trembling as she finally sat up, her eyes locking onto his. "He'll burn this planet to the ground to find me." Rick stared at her for a moment, his mind spinning. The Krillian Empire was no stranger to brutality, and Wyrex was known for his ruthlessness. If what she said was true, then she wasn't just a fugitive. She was a political target. But there was something else in her eyes, something Rick couldn't quite put his finger on. Fear, yes, but also determination, the kind of determination that had kept him alive all those years. He nodded, the weight of the situation settling in. "All right, so what do we do now?" Her expression softened for just a moment before she looked away, toward the window. "Now we run, but first I need you to understand something." Rick followed her gaze, the distant, looming storm outside the window a stark reminder of the danger. "What?" "This isn't just about me," she said, her voice low. "If I die, Wyrex will control the throne. He'll have absolute power over the entire galaxy. You're not just protecting me, Rick. You're protecting everyone." Rick's pulse quickened as the full weight of her words sank in. He hadn't just stumbled upon some royal fugitive. He had stumbled upon the key to saving, or dooming, the galaxy. A flash of green light lit up the sky as a second Krillian ship appeared on the horizon, unmistakable in its sleek, deadly design. The hunt was on. Rick's stomach tightened as he looked out the window of the medbay. The second Krillian ship, larger, far more menacing, was now unmistakably visible, cutting through the storm clouds like a knife through flesh. Its silhouette was sleek, angular, built for speed and firepower. He knew it wouldn't take long for it to find them. The storm outside, relentless and violent, had become a secondary threat. It was the ship that now occupied every part of Rick's mind. He could feel the weight of time pressing down on him with every passing second. "What's the plan?" Rick asked, trying to keep his voice steady as he turned back toward Emily, who was struggling to sit up on the medbed. Her face was pale, her breath shallow, but her eyes were focused, determined. It was the kind of determination Rick recognized, something he'd seen in his own reflection after too many battles, too many close calls. "First, we need to get off this station," Emily replied, her voice still raspy from her earlier struggles. "We can't stay here. The Krillian ships will scan the area for my signature, and as soon as they find it, they'll send in everything they've got." Rick's mind raced. She was right. If they stayed, they would be sitting ducks, and Wyrex would send everything to wipe them out. He couldn't afford to risk it, not when her survival meant the balance of power in the entire galaxy. He gripped the edge of the medbed, his knuckles white. "We'll need to disable the tracking systems, hide your signal. If they can't find us, they won't know where to look." Emily shook her head. "It's not enough. The tracking systems are tied to my bloodline. If they get a fix on me, if my crest starts emitting its signal, they'll know. I need to do more than hide. I need to take control." Rick furrowed his brow. "Take control of what?" "Of the fleet," Emily said, her eyes narrowing. "I've been marked since birth. My bloodline is tied to the throne, a throne that can command the Krillian Empire's entire military. If I get to the Heart Throne, I can override Wyrex's control and end this. I can call off the attack. I can stop him." The word Heart Throne sent a chill down Rick's spine. He had heard whispers about it, rumors of a throne that wasn't just a seat of power, but an AI system capable of controlling entire fleets, entire empires. Only a direct heir could access it, and only through their bloodline could its full power be unleashed. If what Emily was saying was true, then she was not only the last surviving member of her family, she was the only one who could stop the war from spreading across the galaxy. His hand shot out, grabbing a small, worn map of the outpost from the nearby shelf. "Where is this Hearthrone?" he asked. "And how do we get to it?" Emily's eyes flicked over the map, then back to Rick. "It's aboard the Ascendancy, the Krillian flagship. If I can get to the throne's control room, I can seize command of the fleet. But getting there is another story. Wyrex will be waiting for me. He's probably already preparing a trap." Rick's mind was already working. The Ascendancy, the pride of the Krillian fleet, was an imposing target. Rick had heard about it in his military briefings. A ship built with state-of-the-art weaponry, heavily armored and equipped with the Hearthrone system. It was the key to the Krillian Empire's domination. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized something. "This is crazy," he muttered to himself, packing in the small room. "If you're right and Wyrex wants you dead, why would he leave you with a way to fight back? Why would he leave the Hearthrone intact? It doesn't make sense." Emily swallowed, her gaze steely. "Because he thinks I'm dead. He's made the assumption that the Krillian throne is secure with his bloodline. My uncle never thought I'd survive. He made the mistake of underestimating me." Rick studied her, seeing the fire in her eyes. "So you're telling me that all this time, he's been hunting a ghost?" "A ghost that just woke up," Emily said, a faint smile playing at the corner of her lips. "Now he's going to regret it." Rick felt a flicker of respect for her. She wasn't just some royal heir hiding behind her title and wealth. She was fierce, determined, and smart. But he had no illusions. Wyrex wasn't going to go down without a fight, and it was going to be brutal. Even with Emily's abilities, the Ascendancy was a fortress, both a symbol of Krillian power and a weapon designed to crush anyone who stood in its way. Rick exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "All right, we're going to need a plan, and we need to move fast." Emily nodded, her gaze sharp. "I'm not leaving this station without that throne. It's the only way to stop Wyrex. I need you to help me get there." Rick hesitated for a moment. He'd never been a royal protector, never cared much for the politics of powerful families. He was just a mechanic, a soldier turned exile. But something about her, about this situation, was different. It wasn't just about saving one life. It was about saving millions. "You got it," Rick said, his voice resolute. "But we're doing this my way, no more half measures." Emily's lips twitched into a small, tired smile. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Rick turned toward the control panel, his fingers flying over the keys as he prepared the next set of orders. He could feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins again, like it always had during the old days when his life was on the line. Only this time, it wasn't just his life at stake. It was the fate of a galaxy. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the outpost, Rick and Emily were about to embark on something much more dangerous, a battle for the future. But as he ran the simulations on the outpost's defense grid, something caught his eye. A faint signal, a message from the Krillian ships. It wasn't a simple scan. It was a message directed straight at them. Rick's hand hovered over the console, and for a moment the world seemed to slow. He quickly decrypted the transmission. The message was brief, chilling. "Emily Sieva, you have been found. Your escape ends now. Surrender or be erased." Wyrex's voice crackled through the static, cold and ruthless. Rick's heart slammed in his chest. Emily's face went pale as the reality hit them both. Wyrex was no longer just hunting her. He was preparing to make sure she never left this planet alive. Rick's hands flew across the console, but every keystroke felt like a lifetime. The Krillian transmission was still fresh in his mind, echoing in the sterile silence of the medbay. "Surrender or be erased." Wyrex's words were a threat, but they were more than just empty words. Rick knew how the Krillian Empire operated. They didn't make threats, they made promises, and they followed through with terrifying precision. Emily stood beside him, her face pale but resolute. She had been silent since hearing the transmission, her fingers gripping the edge of the medbay table. Rick could feel the weight of the moment hanging between them, but there was no time to dwell on it. The enemy was already coming, and they needed a plan, fast. "How much time do we have?" Rick asked, his eyes scanning the perimeter alarm feeds on the console. The Krillian fleet had likely already locked onto their position. They had to move quickly. "Maybe an hour," Emily replied, her voice steady despite the chaos closing in around them. They'll want to make sure I'm cornered. They'll send scouts first, then a strike team. They'll expect me to be hiding. Rick frowned. Well, they're in for a surprise. This place won't be easy to take down, not with me on defense. He turned back to the console, toggling a few switches to bring up the base's schematics. He pulled up a map of the facility, running his fingers over the glowing lines of the complex. The outpost had been abandoned long ago, a remnant of the human frontier that never quite took off. But for all its age, it had been well designed, rigged with traps, hidden passageways, and sturdy defenses. It's not much, Rick muttered, scanning the schematics, but it's enough. I can lock down all the exterior doors and activate the internal turrets. That should slow them down. We'll need to use the old maintenance tunnels to get around without being seen. Emily nodded, but she didn't look convinced. We won't make it out of here if they send a full strike team. They'll tear the place apart looking for us. Rick clenched his jaw, frustration creeping in. Emily was right, of course. He could prepare all the traps he wanted, but Krillian troops were a different breed. They were relentless, well-trained, and most importantly, they had numbers. But they had one thing Rick knew the Krillians didn't: ingenuity. He turned back to her, his mind working. Okay, we'll fight back, but we'll do it smart. Emily's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Set the traps to force them into choke points, Rick explained. I'll rig the perimeter so they have to come through narrow passages. The old ventilation ducts are a good start. They're tight. They won't have room to maneuver. I'll set up pressure mines, sonic devices, and concussion turrets. Anything that'll make them think twice about getting close. Emily watched him, her eyes softening as she saw the determination in his face. For the first time since they met, Rick felt like he might actually stand a chance in this fight. I'll need you to back me up, he continued. Once I've activated the traps, you can take the high ground. There are observation platforms above the main hall. You'll have a clear view of their movements. You take out the ones I can't hit. And if it gets bad, if they breach the outer doors, I'll need you to keep them off me. I can do that, Emily said, her voice low and serious. But you need to keep me safe, too. Rick turned to face her fully, a small smile on his lips. You don't need me to keep you safe. I just need you to survive. Emily's lips tightened, a flicker of something more than just determination in her eyes. And what happens after that, after we survive? Rick's smile faded slightly. Then we get to the ascendancy, but we'll worry about that later. He turned back to the console, pulling up the old defense grid. The warning lights were flashing, a steady rhythm like a heartbeat, signaling the coming assault. It was time to act. Emily stepped to his side, taking in the array of weaponry that Rick had pulled from the old armory racks. He'd been preparing for a fight he didn't know was coming, but now, standing side by side with her, he realized just how much was riding on the next few hours. The Krillians would stop at nothing to destroy her, to wipe out the last heir to the throne. And Rick wasn't about to let that happen, not on his watch. He moved quickly, pulling out a handheld EMP device and strapping it to his belt. Then he grabbed a railgun, one of the few heavy-duty weapons left in the armory, and tested its weight. It felt right in his hands, familiar like an old friend. Rick activated the base's defense grid, watching as the automated turrets hummed to life, their targeting systems locking onto possible entry points. He made sure the traps were set, pressure sensors hidden beneath the floor panels, and sonic mines disguised to look like ordinary debris. He even configured a few of the old maintenance drones to act as decoys. Emily stood nearby, watching him work. The tension between them was palpable, but it was a different kind of tension now. They were allies, not just survivors. The feeling of partnership, of shared purpose, was something Rick hadn't experienced in a long time. There, he muttered, standing back to survey his handiwork. The traps are set, now we wait. Emily didn't respond immediately, but Rick caught the faintest shift in her posture. She was tired, her body still recovering from the acid burns and the trauma of the storm. But there was something else there too, something fierce and unyielding. You should rest, Rick said, his voice softer than before. You'll need your strength. I'm not tired, she replied, her voice firm though it cracked slightly. I'm ready. I've waited too long for this. Rick hesitated, then nodded. There was no arguing with her. They were both in this now. There was no going back. Outside, the storm continued to howl, but inside the base there was a strange stillness. It was the calm before the storm, a storm of their own making. The Krillian forces were coming, and they had no idea what they were walking into. Rick checked the status of the perimeter alarm again. The Krillian scout ship was getting closer, its presence a silent threat hovering just outside the atmosphere. Suddenly, the door to the control room hissed open, and Emily stiffened. Her eyes snapped to the monitor. "They've arrived," she said quietly. Rick's fingers tightened around the railgun's grip as he looked toward the main entrance. It was time to put the plan into action. The first blast from the Krillian forces struck the outer wall with a deafening roar, shaking the entire base. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the door to the control room rattled, and Rick could feel the fight begin. The hunt had started. The blast that shook the base was the first of many. Rick's breath caught in his throat as the entire structure groaned in response, the walls bending slightly under the pressure of the Krillian strike. The rumbling continued, as though the storm itself was feeding into the chaos outside. "Get ready," Rick muttered, already moving toward the command console. The lights flickered briefly before stabilizing, the hum of the automated defense systems now drowned out by the noise of the Krillian assault. Emily stood beside him, her hand resting on the plasma knife she had picked up from the armory. She didn't flinch at the sound of the explosion. If anything, the noise seemed to sharpen her focus. "They'll come for the main door first. We've got to lock it down completely. That's our only chance." Rick didn't hesitate. His fingers flew over the controls, sealing off the blast doors and locking all internal access points. The last thing he needed was an easy entrance for the Krillians. The defense grid hummed in readiness as he initiated the perimeter locks, while Emily moved to the observation platform, her rifle in hand. "You'll have cover from up there," Rick said, eyeing her from across the room. "I'll bait them through the corridors and force them into the kill zones." "I know," Emily replied, her voice tight. "Just get them to me." Rick met her eyes, and for a moment neither of them said anything. There was a silent understanding between them now. There was no turning back, no second chances. They had to hold the line or face the consequences. He moved quickly, stepping through the corridor toward the main door, the sound of his boots muffled by the thick walls. The tension in the air was suffocating as he crept forward, checking his weapon one last time. He could feel the weight of the coming battle press down on him. Outside, the storm still raged, its green lightning flashing across the sky in jagged, erratic streaks. The Krillian strike team was out there, somewhere in the storm, closing in fast. Rick's hand hovered over the trigger of the EMP device attached to his belt. If they had a way of bypassing his traps, this little gadget would at least short-circuit their tech long enough for him to get a shot in. He approached the main door. The blast earlier had weakened it, and Rick could feel the vibrations of the Krillian forces closing in from behind. He quickly set the EMP device to activate at a distance, then turned back to the hallway, his heart pounding. He didn't expect what happened next. The unmistakable sound of the blast door grinding open sent a jolt of alarm through his body. His eyes widened in shock. "They're inside," he shouted, grabbing his rifle and sprinting back toward the observation platform. Emily was already there, her eyes locked on the enemy's movements through the rain-drenched windows. She was scanning the distance, her body tense. "They breached the west wall," she said, her voice steady but sharp. "They're coming this way." Rick's heart sank. They'd cut through his defenses faster than he expected, and now they were inside. The Krillians wouldn't waste any time. They knew what they were after. "We need to pull back," Rick said urgently, his mind racing. "We can't hold them here, not without reinforcements." "No," Emily said, her voice cold. "Not yet." Rick turned toward her, his pulse quickening. "Emily, we need to move. We can't stay here and fight them in the open." She turned to him, her eyes fierce. "I'm not running. I'm not going to let Wyrex win." Rick stared at her, stunned by the force of her resolve. He'd seen people die before, seen men and women break under pressure, but Emily, she wasn't like the others. There was no hesitation in her voice. She was committed to this fight, no matter the cost. "But," Rick started, but Emily interrupted him, her gaze unwavering. "We need to take them out, slow them down long enough to get to the ascendancy. I've been running my entire life. It's time to stop. We fight, Rick, right here, right now." Rick swallowed hard, torn between his instincts and the raw determination in her voice. She wasn't just fighting for survival, she was fighting for something more, for a cause that went beyond the walls of this station. And damn it, something about her made him want to believe. He nodded slowly. "All right, we fight, But we do it my way. We fall back to the secondary tunnel and force them into the choke points. They'll have no room to maneuver. Emily's lips curled into a tight smile. Let's make them regret it. With that, the plan was set. The time for hesitation was over. They would hold this station until the last possible second, using everything they had to buy themselves time. Rick moved quickly, gesturing for Emily to take the high ground while he took the low. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the walls of the base, the battle was just beginning. The first Krillian soldier appeared at the edge of the corridor, his heavy boots thudding against the metal floor. He was tall, armored in sleek black plating that reflected the green light from the storm outside. His rifle was raised, scanning for movement, but Rick had already anticipated his position. Rick hit the button on the control panel hidden beneath the floor. A sharp hiss echoed through the base, and the sonic mine exploded beneath the soldier's feet. He barely had time to react before the sound disoriented him, his helmet ringing with the force of the blast. The soldier staggered, clutching his helmet as the mine's shockwave rippled through his body, and in that moment Rick opened fire. His railgun roared to life, the powerful rounds slamming into the soldier's armor. The Krillian dropped to the floor, unconscious if not dead. "First blood," Rick muttered, his voice cold. He quickly moved to another vantage point, adjusting the next trap. Emily's voice came through his earpiece, calm and calculating. "They're sending more, 6, maybe 7 in the first wave." Rick didn't reply. He didn't need to. He'd already planned for this. They'd hold the corridors, one soldier at a time, until they couldn't fight anymore. The second wave was approaching. Rick moved silently through the maintenance shaft, his eyes darting over the control panel as he activated the next trap. The automated turrets, hidden deep within the walls, hummed to life. There would be no easy way through the next choke point. As he moved into position, something else caught his eye on the monitor. A figure, one that didn't belong. Rick's breath caught in his throat as the figure moved into view. An unfamiliar soldier, one wearing insignia Rick hadn't seen before. It wasn't a Krillian uniform. The realization hit him like a blow to the stomach. One of the soldiers wasn't Krillian. He was human, and he was standing right outside the main breach, watching Rick through the narrow ventilation slit. Rick's heart pounded in his chest as the realization sank in. A human soldier wearing the insignia of a mercenary group was standing just outside the main breach, silently observing through the narrow ventilation slit. Rick's mind raced, the sudden twist of events sending a wave of cold dread over him. He had known that Wyrex would stop at nothing to get to Emily, but the presence of a mercenary was unexpected. What was a human soldier doing here in the middle of this Krillian assault? Emily's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Rick, what's going on? I'm seeing movement near the West Hall." He couldn't afford to take his eyes off the mercenary. The man's posture suggested he wasn't just here to observe. He was waiting for something, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Stay put," Rick ordered, his voice low and controlled. He quickly checked the readout on the console. The mercenary was alone, but that didn't make him any less dangerous. Rick had faced enough mercenary groups during his time in the military to know that they worked for the highest bidder, no questions asked. If Wyrex had paid them to hunt Emily down, then this mercenary was a problem they couldn't ignore. Rick moved swiftly, stepping quietly across the corridor, trying to remain out of sight. His mind was calculating the risk with every step. He had no idea if the mercenary was working for Wyrex or if he was just a freelancer, but the fact that he was here, so close to Emily, made it clear that he couldn't be trusted. As he crept closer, Rick adjusted his grip on the rifle, readying himself for whatever came next. He moved into position just a few feet behind the mercenary. His finger hovered over the trigger, but he hesitated for only a second. He didn't want to kill him, at least not yet. The soldier might have information they needed. Rick tapped the comm. "Emily, there's a human soldier here, not Krillian, a merc." "A mercenary?" Emily's voice was tight with disbelief. "What the hell are they doing here?" "I don't know, but we need to deal with him before he spots you. Get to the east side. I'll handle this." Rick heard a faint click in his earpiece as Emily acknowledged his order. He took a deep breath, crouching low, and closed the distance between himself and the mercenary. He reached the end of the hallway and pressed himself flat against the wall, watching the man intently. The soldier stood at the breach point, his back to Rick, scanning the shadows in front of him. Rick's pulse quickened. This was his chance. In one swift motion, Rick stepped forward, grabbing the mercenary by the shoulder and spinning him around. The man's eyes widened in surprise as he went for his weapon, but Rick was faster. He slammed the soldier's arm against the wall, pinning him with the force of his weight. The man grunted, but Rick held him steady, his knee digging into the mercenary's side to keep him from squirming. "You're making a mistake, soldier," the mercenary growled, his voice thick with menace. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Rick's grip tightened. "Tell me who you're working for." The mercenary's eyes flicked toward the hallway, his gaze shifting nervously. "I'm not telling you anything." Rick's expression hardened. "You will, or I'll make you." But before he could press further, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway. Rick's head snapped toward the direction of the noise. More Krillian soldiers were coming. The mercenary wasn't the only problem anymore. Rick's hand moved quickly to the back of the soldier's neck, pressing a stun device against the base of his skull. The mercenary's body went rigid for a moment before going limp, his eyes fluttering closed. He collapsed against Rick, unconscious. Rick lowered the man to the floor, breathing heavily. He didn't have time to interrogate him. He needed to move. A quick glance at the nearby monitors confirmed that the Krillian forces were advancing, faster than Rick had anticipated. They were closing in on the secondary tunnels. He had to act, and fast. "Emily, we've got more trouble. The mercenary was a distraction. They're coming for the backup systems now." Emily's voice came through, clear and sharp. "I'm on the east side. I'll slow them down." Rick moved swiftly, adjusting the settings on the internal defense systems. He activated a series of laser barriers to block the path leading toward the Heartthrone chamber. The Krillians wouldn't be able to bypass them without some serious work. He only had a few minutes before they would adapt and try to push through. But there was another problem. The mercenary, he wasn't just here for Emily. The Krillian forces knew where they were now, and Rick suspected that Wyrex had a hand in it. If this mercenary had infiltrated the base, it wasn't just about stopping Emily. It was about setting them up for a bigger fall. Rick had to find out what was going on. His mind raced as he thought through the possibilities. Could Wyrex have planted a spy among the mercenaries? Or was this just the beginning of something much worse? The faint sound of static broke through his thoughts. "Rick," Emily's voice crackled. "You need to get to the Heartthrone now." Rick's stomach dropped. "What's going on?" "They know about the throne. They've been trying to hack into the system. If Wyrex gets control of it, he'll wipe us out. I've bought us some time, but I can't keep them off forever. You need to get to it before they do." Rick cursed under his breath. The Heartthrone was their only chance to stop Wyrex. If he took control of it, it would be game over. He sprinted toward the Heartthrone chamber, his rifle raised and his thoughts focused on the task ahead. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was it. The final fight. The Heartthrone would decide everything. As Rick approached the chamber's entrance, he froze. A soft beep echoed from the console nearby. It was a signal, one he hadn't expected. Wyrex's voice came through loud and clear, the cold, calculated tone sending a chill down Rick's spine. "Rick, you've been a thorn in my side long enough, but no more. This game ends now. I know what you're after." Rick's eyes widened as the chamber doors slowly began to open, revealing the throne's glowing interface at the center. But something wasn't right. The light wasn't just from the throne. It was coming from the walls, the ceiling, a trap. He didn't have much time. Before Rick could react, the lights flickered once and a series of high-pitched alarms blared, warning him of something far worse. The walls began to close in. The blaring alarms filled the chamber, their shrill sound echoing off the cold metal walls. The lights flickered again, this time more violently, casting eerie shadows across the glowing interface of the Heartthrone. Rick's heart pounded in his chest as he scanned the room, every instinct screaming that something was terribly wrong. The walls are closing, Rick thought, his mind racing as he took in the narrowing space. He barely had time to react. The chamber doors had already begun to close behind him, trapping him in. But the real danger came from the walls themselves. They were slowly closing in from all sides, the massive panels sliding down toward the center of the room, forcing everything into a smaller, tighter space. Rick cursed under his breath and spun toward the Heartthrone's interface. The glowing bioconstruct was still pulsing, but now there was something different about it. The once calm and controlled light had become erratic, flickering in sync with the pulsing alarms. It wasn't just a throne, it was a weapon. And right now, it was very much alive. "Emily," Rick shouted into his comms, his voice harsh. It's a trap. The room's collapsing. We need to move now. The urgency in his voice must have reached her because there was no hesitation in her reply. I'm on my way, she said. The sharpness in her voice cut through the noise. Hold on. Rick didn't wait to hear more. He sprinted toward the hearthrone, his mind working faster than his feet could carry him. The walls were coming down with mechanical precision, the heavy metal scraping against the floor. He had to get to the throne before it was too late. But the closer he got, the more the interface seemed to draw him in, like a magnetic pull that threatened to take control of his thoughts. His fingers brushed against the surface, and the moment he touched it, the world around him seemed to shift. His body went rigid as the interface connected directly to him, sending an electric jolt through his mind. The biofeedback was overwhelming. His thoughts flashed in and out of focus. He could feel his body responding to the throne's commands, his muscles stiffening, his heartbeat sinking to the pulsing light. It wasn't just a throne. It was alive, a sentient AI. Suddenly, the storm outside the station seemed to die down in his mind, replaced by a rush of data, unreadable strings of code and voices whispering through his thoughts. But amidst the noise, one voice broke through. Rick. His breath caught. It wasn't just any voice, it was hers. Emily, he whispered, as if speaking louder would make the voice clearer. Rick, I don't have much time. The mercenaries, they've disabled the backup systems. Wyrex is trying to override your control. Get to the secondary override now. Rick snapped back to reality, his body jerking as if waking from a trance. Emily's voice had cut through the AI's hold on him, bringing him back to himself. He couldn't afford to lose focus now, not when everything they had fought for was on the line. He reached for the secondary override hidden within the console, his fingers trembling as he input the decryption codes from memory. The AI fought back, pushing against him, but Rick didn't hesitate. He slammed the command key. A sudden surge of power shot through the chamber. The walls stopped their descent, halting just a few inches from Rick's face. The alarm's shrill tone ceased as the room stabilized, the oppressive feeling of impending doom lifting. The throne's light flickered once more, then dimmed. Rick didn't wait. He bolted for the door, the sound of metal grinding behind him as he made his way out of the heartthrone chamber. His mind was still reeling from the strange connection with the throne. Its influence had been strong, but Emily's voice had grounded him. She had saved him just like he had saved her. The hallway outside was eerily quiet. Rick could feel the weight of the moment. There was still a war to be won, but for now they had survived. For now. He didn't have much time to dwell on it, though. He had to find Emily. They couldn't leave the station until they were sure Wyrex couldn't track them. Emily, where are you? Rick's voice crackled over the comms. I'm in the lower maintenance hall, Emily replied, her voice steady, though he could hear the hint of exhaustion in her tone. But there's a problem. The mercenaries, they're regrouping. We need to move fast. Wyrex will have already called in reinforcements. Rick cursed, I'm coming to you, stay where you are. He didn't bother waiting for a response. He knew Emily, she was tough. But Rick couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't done yet. He knew Wyrex knew how his mind worked. If Wyrex had sent mercenaries, it was because he knew they were too strong together. It was time to break them apart. Rick reached the lower maintenance hall and found Emily crouched near an old console, her rifle resting across her lap. She looked up as he approached, her face lit by the dim glow of the screen. You found it, she said, nodding toward the Heartthrone access panel. Her eyes were still sharp, but there was a weariness about her. She had been through too much to just walk away from it all. Rick nodded. Yeah, I got it under control for now. Emily exhaled, her breath shaky. It's not enough, Rick. Wyrex will come for me again, you know that, right? Rick knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. We'll deal with him, but we need to leave here. The longer we stay, the more time he has to figure out where we are. Emily stood up slowly, taking her rifle in hand. Right, no more hiding. Rick looked at her, his eyes meeting hers. And no more running, we finish this. The air outside the outpost had turned bitterly cold, the storm subsiding as they made their way to the ship's hangar bay. The sound of their footsteps was muffled against the metal floors, the stillness broken only by the occasional hum of the station's remaining systems. When they reached the hangar, Rick felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. The station was eerily quiet, too quiet. And then, without warning, the distant sound of approaching engines filled the silence. Rick's heart dropped. The unmistakable shape of a Krillian warship loomed in the distance, descending through the storm clouds like a beast hunting its prey. They had no time left. The final battle was about to begin.